Great. Yeah, so I wanted to share on a number of topics, predominantly patience this morning is something we'd touched on a couple months ago. Probably it's been that long already, but I got my COVID vaccination last night. So I was a little bit yesterday, so I was a little bit sick overnight, or just a little sort
The
of
second dose? Or?
second dose. So sort of on the
Yeah.
edge of fever. So patience was very much on my mind, and just thinking a little bit more about the power of that, the power of that practice to sort of be able to endure and weather difficult conditions without becoming unhappy. So yeah, this sort of interesting combination between normally always wanting to follow our wishes. Like normally we just want to do whatever we want to do. We just follow our wishes continuously. And that's really how we build up this version of ourself. The version of ourself that we've built up is just through following, one wish after another. And when we encounter something that is not what we want, right, we feel bad, or someone's unpleasant to us, or we have to encounter some difficulty, then it normally makes us unhappy. And so patience is a way of approaching difficult situations so we can keep our mind happy and peaceful in the face of difficulty. So, but I also wanted in the meditation to introduce something that's an outgrowth of the meditations we've been doing over the last couple of months, really. So we started with focusing on breathing meditation, shifted to this more subtle version of just sort of recognizing the inner energies moving through our body. And I wanted to take our attention inside the body a little bit, with some meditations to sort of go even deeper inside our physical selves. So that's how we'll get started with our preliminary meditation. So as usual, we can get started just by finding a comfortable position for meditation. Taking a deep breath in and out. Then another breath, and just inviting ourselves to relax. And then another breath, just asking ourselves, what is important now? And we become aware of the rhythm of our breath. How our body just naturally keeping itself alive. Even when we're not paying attention to our breath, our body just naturally keeping itself alive. Some basic subconscious wish to stay alive through breathing. And then we can notice other signs, more subtle signs that we are alive, subtle indications such as feelings of tingling in our skin, feelings of weight and pressure in our body, ringing in our ears. These are things we don't have conscious control over. And often when we think about our body, there's a tendency for us to remain superficial at skin level. But we hold our emotions even more deeply, deep inside our body. We can imagine our whole body just becomes the nature of light from the point of view of our perception of our body. Imagine our body is just a body of light. Not feeling solid or heavy, just some light in space. We can imagine that all of our inner organs just disappear, our flesh, bones, muscles, and so forth disappear and become the nature of light, and our body becomes like a hollow shell of light. But inside this hollow body of light, we imagine a column of light running from the very crown of our head down to the very bottom of our pelvis, running down through our neck, through our heart, our belly button, lower abdomen, We imagine that at the top and the bottom it's open, so that our body is like a hollow shell of light with this central column in the middle, running right down the center. We try to feel that column inside, going deep, deep into the center of our head, the center of our throat, the center of our heart, right behind our navel, our lower abdomen. And we just meditate on this perception of our body, very gently touching deep inside our body, the very core of our being. We imagine this column is straight like an arrow, the nature of light, very soft, smooth like a flower petal. This column of light, this channel of light, runs right through the core of our being, through the core of our body, but also through the core of our personality, our deepest instincts. We just feel at home, comfortable, familiar with this visualization. Just imagining that this is a structure deep inside of us. We feel our whole body, nature of light, but running through the very core of our being, this channel of light from the crown of our head, deep inside the center of our body, but implicitly running through the center of our personality, our history, our experience, our existence. Then we can generate a strong sense of gratitude for this life that we have and everyone and everything that has helped us to sustain this life so far. Developing a strong wish to repay the kindness that we have received throughout our life by retraining our mind at the deepest levels. And then For this purpose, we make a decision to try to listen, contemplate carefully, to take these teachings deeply into our heart. And then we can open our eyes and rise from our meditation. So this is that meditation is a traditional way of beginning to sort of touch more deeply inside of us these deep tendencies and habits of mind, and again, we tend to, like, when we tend to think about our body, we tend to think about our the superficialities of our body, our appearance, um, how we looking to others, or maybe how do we feel on the outside and so forth. But of course, there's this secret inner world. There's a secret inner world happening inside of our body, also secret inner world happening inside of our mind, and it determines all of our behaviors, right? So we have all of these very deep instinctive reactions, positive or negative reactions to the things that we're experiencing. And so our life unfolds kind of one action at a time. We sort of build up this sense of who we are over the course of our life. So I was pondering of late, and so I'm so glad that you're having good experience staying with that meditation, right? So it's something that all of these are things that you can stay with, and come back to and practice on your own, sort of gets more familiar. So all of these meditations, really, our goal is to build familiarity, is to build a sense of comfort and ease with them so that they become quite natural, instinctive. I was pondering, what is the relationship between the traditional ways of training the mind that I had learned and modern understanding of how our mind works. And one of the most simple explanations I'd heard of how our mind works is one that was the way it was framed by a psychologist named Daniel Kahneman in this book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And he said we have these very fast thinking parts of our mind he calls system one, the sort of default, like our instinctive reactions to things. And then a very slow, methodical, more conscious way of thinking, which he calls system two. And we tend to think that we are defined by our conscious actions. But in reality, most of our thinking is all on the unconscious level. It's mostly on the unconscious level, this system one. And so system one is the world of biases and instincts and reactions and so forth. And there's even the term unconscious bias has sort of come into modern language, just even in the last 5 years or so. It's a lot more common. And I think in popular culture, people tend to feel like the goal is to get rid of unconscious biases, right? Like if I tend to have more respect for men than women, then that's an unconscious bias. It's problematic for society and so forth. So I should try to rid myself of that unconscious bias and have equal respect for everyone. And there's certainly truth in that, but what is not true is the idea that you can ever get rid of your unconscious biases. The vast majority of our thinking was, is, and always will be just unconscious and instinctive. What we can do, however, is become more aware of these unconscious tendencies, identify the problematic ones, and gradually nudge them in a more beneficial direction. But the problem is that these unconscious tendencies are very deep. We're normally they're unconscious, right? So we're normally not aware of them. B, they're very deep, and so they're very hard to change because they're the result of, you know, um, they have been created and reinforced through every action, that we've taken on that basis throughout our whole life. So if I, um, if because of society or my parents or whatever, if I have some um, unconscious lack of respect for women relative to men, then that will have been with me through much of my life, and I will have acted on that basis and spoken on that basis and thought and had reactions on that basis. And every time I do that, you're reinforcing that habit, right? And so it becomes deeper and deeper, and so it becomes harder to change. And so it's like the whole idea of, you know, turning a battleship around. It's like a very slow process. There's a lot of momentum, right? So but basically, what we're doing with these meditation classes is exactly that. We're beginning to try to shift and nudge some of our unconscious tendencies in a more beneficial direction. And so the reason we spend time, relaxing our mind, softening up our mind, um, sort of accessing deeper, more peaceful parts of our mind is because then our mind becomes a bit more malleable, a little bit easier for us to nudge in a more useful direction. When we're under a lot of stress and pressure and got to do this and do and so forth, then it becomes a lot harder for us to become aware of those unconscious tendencies and shift them and change them and so forth. And these unconscious tendencies, they're embodied in a sense, so that even inside of our body, there are these, um, it's not absolute, it's not like black and white, so to speak, but like inside our body, there are these emotional centers, so to speak, that we're often not aware of, and we often feel like we can't change. So just even becoming aware of inside of our body with this meditation, feeling like there is a central channel running through the center of our body, begins to bring our mind more deeply inside the body, which is parallels the idea of going more deeply inside of our mind, parallels the idea of accessing these more deeper, more emotional, more instinctive, the sort of system one that's operating all the time, where we can make deeper changes more easily. Um, and the point about, so this is all in the domain of recognizing habits, changing habits, reducing harmful habits, adopting more beneficial habits. So it's all sort of in that domain. Um, so I said that I wanted to talk about patience today. And patience, the traditional definition of patience that I'd introduced previously was a mind that is able to happily accept difficult conditions. So such as feeling sick or not having our wishes fulfilled, or other people that we feel have harmed us. There was a prayer I was reading this morning. I seek your blessings um, to complete the perfection of patience, so that even if every single being in three realms, in all the worlds, out of anger were to abuse me, criticize me, threaten me, or even take my life, undisturbed, I would repay their harm by helping them. So this is the strong version of patience. So these are the kinds of teachings that I kind of grew up with. It's very strong. Like, even if they take my life undisturbed, I'm going to repay their harm by helping them. So it's quite amazing to even imagine that level of patience. But one fairly common example of this is a mother who, even if her children are like screaming, I hate you, you ruined my life, right? The mother's still, it's like, all right, come on, I'm still going to help you, right? The contrast between receiving anger and not responding with anger is dramatic, right? My experience, perhaps perhaps also your experience, is that nothing makes me angrier than when someone is angry at me. Like if somebody blames me for something, I'm like, I didn't do it. It's not my fault. It's like there's this indignation, like this response. Like if someone is angry at us or doesn't like us or whatever, then our natural response, we just sort of mirror that back. There's a strong tendency. But the idea of being able to receive, this is on the one extreme, right? Extreme receive anger, criticism, threats, harm from others, and not respond with anger ourselves, um, is an incredible accomplishment, is an accomplishment that we can aspire to. That's, again, not to say that we put ourselves in harm's way if we can avoid it, but um, there is this concept, there's this concept uh, called merit, or our inner sense of good fortune. How fortunate are you, right? Um, Now, probably we've done gratitude practices in the past and sort of reflected on how incredibly lucky we are, right? But somehow we tend to take things for granted really, really quickly, right? Um, you get something wonderful, but you take it for granted very, very quickly. And so that's what's called using up our merit. We just sort of take things for granted. So we're using up that sense of good fortune. But anger actually destroys this sense of good fortune. So you can be in the most wonderful environment, everything's perfect, going well in your life, but all of a sudden either you're experiencing some pain or difficulty, um, or someone is being unpleasant to you, or you're having to go through some difficulty, your meditation's not going well, or whatever. Um, it's easy to feel impatient or angry. And at that point, it is as if there is no good fortune in our life. It's like, it's like, it's just, my life's terrible, right? It's this person making everything so difficult. Like, oh, I hate this job, hate this place, hate this whatever. Um, so our mind just zooms right in on that, right? Zooms in on that misfortune. Like there's a little bit of misfortune there, right? Our mind zooms in on that misfortune, and that's the power of our mind. It is as if at that point nothing else exists other than that misfortune. We're just like just ruined. You just ruined. You've heard people say this, right? You've ruined the whole vacation, right? You you know you ruined our dinner plans. You've ruined the whole vacation. You've ruined everything. Blaming other people. Typically, what our anger does always looks for somebody to blame, something to blame, right? Um, Obviously, the opposite of this mind of patience, where it is accepting difficulties. And a final point to make is one way to recognize that one profound way to practice patience, a very profound way to practice patience, is to recognize that even our ability to experience harm and problems comes from who we think we are. Like we've built up this sense of who we think we are through our activities, through our habits, through our behaviors. And we have this strong sense of who we think we are. And it is only because we are this person, right? That we've created this particular sense of ourselves that we are vulnerable. And in a sense, the bigger you are, right, the more vulnerable you are. The bigger you are in the sense of the more stuff you identify with. I'm great at this, I'm best at this, I've done all this, and there's a very strong sense of who we are through the course of what we've done. The stronger that is, the more vulnerable we are. And this kind of takes us back to this perception that everything we've done has been built up over the course of our life through habits, the layering on of habits, right? And if we see ourselves as um, not as not as like a person that just exists, but if instead we see ourselves as the sort of layering on of infinite habits, like we are a creation of all of these habits, the self that we've built really over the course of our life, then we recognize that that is what has made us. That is what has made us vulnerable, and so we can accept difficulties, knowing that. So we can accept difficulties knowing that it is part of the nature of how we've created this sense of self, and that if we want to be free from difficulties, really, then untangling this version of ourself that we think we are is the way to really become free from difficulties. Okay, so why don't we take a few minutes in conclusion to just to let this settle in, and we can dwell a bit on that final point, which I can help you to understand or experience more. So, as usual, as we settle into meditation, we're taking a deep breath in and out, just resetting. And we can think we have built up this strong sense of self throughout our life. We've also inherited, genetic inheritance, cultural inheritance. All of these things make us the person that we think we are. But it is this person who is also so vulnerable to pain. So our deepest habit, the most central habit, is this sense of who we are, right? The sense of self. Makes us a target, and that exposes us to so much pain, suffering, problems, disappointment. So we can practice patience, making a determination to remain peaceful no matter what difficulties we encounter, knowing that it is our own habits that have created this version of ourself that is now vulnerable to pain, suffering. we have built up a deep sense of self, and as a result, we are vulnerable to pain and problems from everything that we consider to be other. If we really want to be free from this pain and suffering, we have to untie these deep inner knots that bind us to a particular view of ourself. Then we can conclude with a wish that through the habits we have laid down in this brief time together, I think may these habits grow, deepen, and unfold as enormous, enormous benefit for ourselves and others. And we can open our eyes and rise from our meditation. Thank you very much.
Yeah,